All right, we are starting a brand new series today, but I do want to tell you about one thing. It's really cool. So, if you didn't check it out yet, we shared this with you several weeks ago that we were going to do the guy version of glamour shots, um, and that is hammer shots. So we have an awesome photo booth over there. We've got Scott, our in-house pro photographer, that's going to be over there. So if you grab your family, guys, listen, if you just want to grab a group of 4 guys and you go, hey, we want to get our pictures taken, I mean, y'all, that's weird and everything, but if you want to do that, you go right ahead. But we've got all the different tools that you can imagine are over there. You can just have a lot of fun. Take your family over there and get a great Father's Day photo that you can blow up, as big as you want because it is HD. And we're going to have a great time doing that. So just have a lot of fun as you enjoy that after the service today. Today we're starting a brand new series called Achilles. Now, I don't know how many of you, I'm assuming most of you are familiar with Achilles. And if you're not familiar with Achilles, you're familiar with Brad Pitt, who played Achilles in the movie a few years ago. But Achilles is an ancient Greek hero. He's not a god. He's a hero. He's actually the son of a mortal father and a sea nymph, which is like a half god or goddess or something like that. And so a soothsayer, when Achilles was young, a soothsayer told the mother of Achilles that he was going to die in battle at the city of Troy. And so just like every other mom, right, that has ever lived, you went, hang on a second, there's something bad happened to my kid. I want to do everything I can to protect my child. And so she went through all these crazy different things trying to make her son basically invulnerable. And so she had someone tell her this. She goes to the river Styx, which if you know your mythology, the river Styx is what you had to cross over to get into eternal life. That if you took your child and you dipped them in the river Styx, it would make his skin invulnerable. And so she takes her toddler son and she grabs him by the back of his ankle as tight as she possibly can and dips him upside down into the river Styx and brings him back out. But because she didn't obviously want to lose her son, she held on to his heel so tightly that the water didn't penetrate underneath her fingers. And so he was invulnerable across his entire body except for the back of his heel. And so as the Trojan War takes place, and Homer's Iliad and Odyssey kind of records that for us, it was a 10-year war. And for 9 years, Achilles was a part of this war, and he was completely undefeated. Like literally, he was unbelievably strong and agile and fast, and he could throw a javelin further than any man could imagine. He completely destroyed Troy's hero, Hector was his name, and was just unbeatable. In the final battle, though, of Troy, it says that he creeps over the wall, and Paris, who's the son of the king of Troy, shoots his last arrow, and the god Apollo takes it because he's angry at Achilles, takes the arrow and aims it perfectly to his heel and hits him in the back of the heel and kills him instantly. The story and the myth was so potent and so powerful that when anatomy and physiology was beginning to be created, they discovered that at the back of our heel is this tendon that's actually not a very big tendon. It's called the Achilles tendon. Now, those of us that are sports people, we're very familiar with the Achilles tendon, are we not? Because in sports, that's one of the most devastating injuries that you can experience in sports. And it's this tiny little tendon. In fact, if you reach the back of your heel, you can feel it. It's just this tendon right here. It's very small. It's not very large. But it absolutely, if it snaps, first of all, it's audible, which is unbelievable. Makes you want to throw up. I'm not going to lie. If you've ever heard somebody's tendon snap, and I have, you just kind of look at them and go, oh, because it is not an enjoyable sound whatsoever. And when it snaps, it's incredibly debilitating. You can't walk, you can't run, you can't put weight on it. And so now they've got these surgeries and all these different things, but usually, even if that happens, you are just not the same player. And what's crazy is that Achilles tendon tears usually take place at the worst possible moment. There's never a good time, but especially with these big sports heroes and stuff, it usually takes place at the worst possible moment. And I want to share a few with you this morning that I'm sure you remember. In 2010, those of you that are soccer people, like all 2 of you, remember that David Beckham, right before the World Cup, tore his Achilles tendon as he was reaching for a ball, and he just dropped to the ground, and everybody knew what had happened at that point in time, that it was just he was done with, and he was never the same player again. In 2013, Kobe Bryant, in the playoffs, tore his Achilles heel, and most people say, you know what, he just wasn't the same player after that, didn't have the same explosiveness, never really came back. In 2017, the greatest Achilles injury ever happened to the greatest guy ever that it could have possibly happened to, in Richard Sherman. If you don't know who Richard Sherman is, that's because you don't follow football, because unless you're a Seattle Seahawks fan, you despise Richard Sherman. But anyways, the Legion of Boom, late November, he tore his Achilles heel, and many people believe that that's the reason that they didn't win the Super Bowl that year, because he was the anchor to the back end of the Legion of Boom. In 2019, Kevin Durant, in Game 5 of the NBA Finals, Steve Kerr knew that he was hurting and his heel was sore, but he put him in anyways, and the entire city of gold of California has never forgiven him since, because it tore his Achilles heel. He was out for 18 months. And then, of course, last year, probably only closest to Richard Sherman, Aaron Rodgers, went to the New York Jets. The New York Jets, they were going to win it all. You know, he comes out, yeah. 4 plays later, he's leaving the field like that. And Aaron Rodgers' season was over with the Achilles heel. It's just an unbelievable thing that this tiny little tendon can create such havoc in all of us. And so much so that now when you ask somebody, what is your Achilles heel? They don't say, this tendon at the back. No, they know exactly what you're asking. They're asking, what is your weakness? What is the thing that is keeping you from being successful in all the areas of life that you are to be successful in? And I got to tell you, for all of us, it's the same thing. You and I have the same Achilles heel. Now, some of you may have more, some of you may have less, but I promise you, we all have the same one. And I'll prove it to you over the next 3 weeks. The same one that we have is this. The root of almost every issue and sin issue in our lives, the root of it all, when we really dig down to it and the problems in our lives, is pride. It's pride. Every single one of us. Now, here's what's funny. Some of you, the minute I said that, you're like, I'm not proudful, I'm humble, and I let everybody know how humble I am. Yeah, okay. You might have missed that point there, right? Pride. Pride is at the root of almost every single sin issue and problem that we have in our lives. You're like, no, that's not the case. Let me prove it to you, right? You don't get the promotion at work, and you think you should because you're better than the other person. And you go, well, yeah, but that's just truth. That's not pride. You go, no, you don't understand. I'm so great at this, and I'm good at this. You push your children to do all these sports and athletics, not because necessarily you think they're so great, but because when they do great, you feel great. And that's You see, pride ebbs and flows in every single one of us. And even those of you like, well, I'm a wallflower. I don't even you have pride, because your pride is probably built in what people think about you. And so you're so fearful of doing anything that might cause people to think less of you. And so therefore, that's actually a matter of pride. The root issue of almost all the sin issues and problems in our life is actually pride. I want to read for you a quote from C.S. Lewis. He writes this in Mere Christianity. He says, unchastity, that's sexual immorality, having sex outside marriage in any way, shape, or form, whatever the fashion is, unchastity, anger, greed, drunkenness. We're like, yeah, this sounds like a great party. And all are what's the word he uses? Flea bites. Tiny little insignificant things that are annoying, but they're not a big deal in comparison to pride. He goes, man, pride is debilitating. It cuts us off at the knees. It keeps us from being able to do all that we're supposed to do. It makes us constantly not be who God has called us to be. Do you know that in the Bible there are over 150 passages specifically talking about pride or arrogance. There's over 150 passages specifically talking about pride and arrogance. So we're going to go through all of them today. No, I'm just kidding. You're like, oh, wow. I'm going to share 3 of them with you because I want you to see the common theme, okay? 2 Samuel 22:28. He's talking about God, you rescue the humble, but your eyes watch the proud and humiliate them. Proverbs 16:5. The Lord detests all the proud of heart. Be sure of this, they will not go unpunished. James 4:6. He gives us more grace. That is why the Scripture says God opposes the proud, but shows favor to the humble. Big idea for today. Pride triggers God's opposition, but humility invites God's blessing. Pride triggers God's opposition, but humility invites God's blessing. You go, man, why in the world would God oppose me simply because I'm being prideful? Well, let me tell you this. Let me switch it up a little bit because the Bible tells us that God is unchanging. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He doesn't change like the shifting of shadows. He doesn't change like the daybreak or the sunset. He doesn't change like the seasons. He is the same always, all the time. So if our pride triggers God's opposition, it's not because God has moved, it's because we have moved. You see, there's a line that God draws, right? He goes, those I oppose and those I actually will bless. And so what happens is when we step over that line and we now begin to take pride, and I'm not talking about going, wow, I love my kid or I love my family, I take pride in a job well done. We're talking about arrogance. We're talking about thinking of yourself better than you actually are. We're talking about praising yourself above other people. We're talking about believing that things shouldn't happen to you, well, because you're you. That's pride. And when you do that, you are literally stepping on the opposite of what God is doing. And so because of that, God opposes you. But then the cool part is, he goes, yeah, but when you humble yourself, you bring yourself back into line with the blessings of God. Now, if I asked you that, how many of you would like God to oppose you? Now, there may be a few of you that are like, dropped on your head as a child or something like that. You're like, oh, I'd love for God to oppose me. But most of us would go, yeah, I'm not a fan of that. I don't want to do that. That's why we're going to talk about this issue and what it means to be prideful and what God does and what it means to be humble and what that looks like. But just today, I want you to get this, that when you hold pride in yourself, when you hold pride, that literally triggers God's opposition. God is literally working against you when you have that pride in your life. Now, I can just hear the pushback in my head because honestly, when I went through this, because I said the pride is an issue for all of us, pride is an issue for me, and you're like, oh no, Dave, and that makes my pride feel really good when you say that. But the truth is that I struggle with it just like you all do. And so the pushback is, yeah, but if I don't elevate myself, nobody else will, right? If I elevate others, then others will devalue me. If I actually admit, guys, this is for us today, praise Jesus on Father's Day, if I admit that I need help or directions or anything like that, it's an admission that I'm weak. And so in our pride, we just keep moving forward because we're unwilling to be humble. Jesus touches on this issue in the book of Matthew, and Matthew quotes Jesus Christ, and he says this in Matthew chapter 23, verse 12. For those who exalt themselves, in other words, those who choose the path of pride, it says that they will be what? Humbled. Other translations say they will be brought low. And those who humble themselves or lower themselves, they will be what? Exalted. So the choice is really clear here. You can either have God in opposition to you, pushing you down and holding you back and saying, no, I am not going to let you advance because of the pride that you have in your heart. Or you can have God going, hey, let me pick you up. Let me put you where you need to be. Let me honor you as you are willing to be humble before those. Now, I want to be really clear here because oftentimes when people hear the word humility, they end up actually sliding into what's called false humility. Have you ever met somebody that had false humility? Right? You're like, man, you painted that picture? I mean, that picture that's awesome. You're like, no, it's really awful. It's terrible. I walked into here, I tripped, I hit my paintbrushes, and this just came out. You're like, what? That's false humility, right? Really, do you know what the root of false humility is? It's pride. Because you do that in the hopes of what? They're going to be like, oh no, you're amazing. How great you are. Oh, right? And false humility is really just an effort to get somebody else to talk about how great you are. So we're not talking about false humility here. In fact, another quote from C.S. Lewis, and I think this is so cool. This is a great definition of humility. Humility is not thinking less of yourself, but rather thinking of yourself less. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. In other words, you're not walking around going, I'm stupid, I'm terrible, I'm awful, I'm a loser, I'm a screw up, I'm a failure, I'm a massive mistake and a disappointment to all those around me. That's not humility. Rather, it's, okay, in this situation, this is what's best for me, but if I do that, that's going to have a negative impact on others. So what's the best thing to help other people achieve their goals? How can I exalt other people instead of just myself? That's humility. That's being willing to think of yourself less, not less of yourself. Now, there's an interesting, again, just so you know, we have the Mulligan Shootout coming up this Saturday, but just so you know, there's this new technology. It's called Arccos Golf, ARCCOS. Now, if you're like a golfer, you probably know this, but it's a software that they developed, and they have over the years they have tracked over 6 million golf swings, 6 million. And so they can, with absolute pinpoint accuracy, tell each and every one of us where we hit our shots. And I want to show you. I'll just show you what I'm talking about here. So we have a golf course, right? And it's going to tell you, if you stepped up to this tee, our coach can tell you, listen, I know there's an 8-to-1 ratio. In other words, for every 9 shots, 8 will be this, 1 will be one of the other things. And so the question is it going to be short? Is it going to be right? Is it going to be left? Is it going to be long? So let me just do really quick. How many of you think that your shot is going to be long? Like if you hit that, your shot would be long. Okay, cool. Most of you are very, Billy, yeah? No? He's thinking. All right. How do you say, yeah, I would hit right every single time, right? Okay, cool. How do you say, no, I would hit left? Okay, there we go. How do you say, no, I would hit short? 8-to-1 short. Do you know why we always do that? Because of pride. We can hit it way longer than we think. I love it. Several years ago, I went golfing with some guys, and they were like, oh, listen, I'm a scratch golfer. I'm like, oh, yeah, cool, awesome. This is going to be great. So we start playing. I kid you not. He missed the golf ball on the tee box more than once. He was not a scratch golfer, unless he's like, I scratched myself while golfing. But see, that's what pride does. Pride always makes us come up short. Every time. Because we think more of ourselves, and we tend to always fall flat on our face. So, I want to share with you 3 areas that pride causes us to come up short. Area number 1, pride never makes you bigger and always leaves you smaller. Pride never makes you bigger and always leaves you smaller. Pride is one of those things that when you hear it in others, you can identify it immediately, right? In fact, right now, some of you are thinking to yourself, I wish so-and-so were here to hear this message. Or you're thinking, I'm glad they're sitting next to me. This was the day they needed to be here. Do you know what causes those thoughts? Pride. Because you think you're better than them. And you're not. It is easy to identify pride in others. And when you hear it, when you come across someone that's prideful, in your mind, do you think to yourself, wow, what a great person they are? You don't, do you? Now, here's what's crazy. In our minds, as we're formulating whatever sentence of pride we're about to regurgitate out of our mouths, our pride tells us, listen, if you say this, they're going to think, oh my gosh, he is the bomb. That was my 1980s right there for you. But instead, the minute the words begin to drop out of your mouth, the eye rolls around you begin to happen. Because we see it. And pride devalues us not only in the eyes of God, but in the eyes of others. Look at what it says in Proverbs chapter 29:23. Pride brings a person low, but the lowly in spirit gain honor. When you truly connect with somebody that is genuinely humble, what is your response? Isn't it often to go, man, great job, man. You want to lift them up. You want to tell them what a great job they've done. You're like, man, that's awesome. You're like, oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I really worked really hard on that. You're like, man, that's awesome. Fantastic. Great job. When you hear someone who is humble, your desire is like, I want to lift you up. Now, when you hear someone who is prideful, what is the response you want to have? Right? You want to stomp them down. You want to burst their bubble. You want to cut their legs from out from underneath them. You want to do everything you can because that is our visceral reaction to someone who is prideful. And here's what's amazing when we look at it from a macro standpoint, that literally affirms what we were talking about earlier, that pride triggers God's opposition, but humility releases God's blessing. Area number 2. Pride blinds you to your own faults. Pride blinds you to your own faults. Why is it? I mean, seriously, why is it that it is so easy to detect pride in other people, but almost impossible to detect it in our own selves? It's an amazing thing to me. The only answer I can come up with is this, that when we say prideful statements, our mind goes, yeah, that's right, baby. And so we don't think of it as prideful. But it's really difficult to identify pride in and of ourselves. Now, our spouses usually can identify pride in us very quickly. And sometimes they take pride in pointing that out. And so then when they take pride in pointing it out, then you can take pride in pointing it out. It's a wonderful vicious circle that takes place. But literally, it is so hard because especially the more that we allow pride to become a part of our internal culture and structure, the less of the problems that we see in and of ourselves. Because pride will blind us even to the most glaring faults of other people. Have you ever met somebody, or maybe you know somebody, that they have, literally, they think they can do so much, but their wheelhouse is about the size of a hamster wheel. Like literally, this is what they can do, but this is what they think they can do. Because pride blinds us to our faults. Proverbs chapter 26, verse 12. Do you see a person who is wise in their own eyes? There is more hope for a fool than for them. Because when we hold pride in our hearts, that pride triggers God's opposition. So therefore, we need to have humility so that we invite God's blessing into our life. Area number 3. Pride pushes God out. Pride pushes God out. If you are so full of yourself, there's no room for God. When you believe you can do it all, there's no need to cry out to God. When you believe you've got it all figured out, there is no necessity to go, God, I need your guidance. Pride pushes God out. Psalm 10:4. In his pride, the wicked man does not seek him, God. In all his thoughts, there is what? No room for God. You see, that's why pride is so devastating. That's why pride triggers God's opposition, because God goes, listen, I made you to have a connection with me. I made you intentionally to be able to have a relationship with me. But when we have this pride, it pushes our need for God, not our real need for God, but our perception of a need for God out of the way. We go, God, we don't need you. I got this. And then all of a sudden you realize, I don't. And we sit and we wait and we hope that we can figure it out. And God's going, I've been right here all along. But you were so proud, you didn't even think that you needed me. Pride triggers God's opposition in our life. But humility invites God's blessing. Today, since we understand and we realize that pride is really, really, really difficult for us to see in ourselves. Pride really rarely reflects itself in the mirror when we take an account for our life. I want to share with you some questions. These are not original with me, so if you don't like them, tough luck. So here we go. There are 7 questions that will help you discover where pride is lurking behind the shadows. Number 1. Who or what are you most critical of? Who or what are you most critical of? Do you realize that the area where you struggle in pride is usually an area where somebody else is successful in? And you want what they have. And so, instead of simply working harder or turning more over to God, instead, it's easier to be critical of somebody else and tear them down so you don't feel so bad. The most obvious of this is on social media, and usually it's parents with their children, and they post these wonderful pictures, and you think to yourself, yeah, but I've seen their house. Yeah, but I know their kid's a raving lunatic and a brat. Yeah, but their kid, what a loser. Like literally. Some of you, the reason you're not laughing is because you're like, I know, I don't want to admit to that. Because we do that. So what are you most critical of? Number 2, when's the last time you felt snubbed or insulted? See, the last time you felt snubbed or insulted, that was because it hit and chipped at an area of pride. And so because of that, your pride got triggered, and your pride's going, hey, you can't let that go, man. You got to deal with that. You got to run with that. So that's probably the area of pride. Number 3, who do you secretly envy And I love this, or want to see fail. Like, who do you secretly envy and want to see fail? Usually it goes something like this. Oh, man, proud of you. I hate you. Man, I really hope that you are successful. I can't wait to see them fall flat on their face. Who or what are you secretly envy of or want to see fail? Number 4, when are you the most tempted to lie, or for those of you who, don't lie, embellish? Is it with your reputation? Is it with your family? Is it with your cardiovascular fitness? Is it with your social media or your Instagram or your Snapchat or your TikTok, and you embellish to make everyone think it's better? Number 5, what won't you ask for help with? Oh, I got to be honest with you. I hate this question. It's a terrible question, and I don't want to ask anybody's help in answering this question. Number 6, what or who do you desperately want to control? What or who do you desperately want to control because you see the level of pride or how people think about you because of that person or that thing? And number 7, where or when do you hide who you really are? Where or when do you hide who you really are? And don't these questions just absolutely suck? Are they terrible? Because the answers to those questions are not enjoyable, are they? Nobody in here, I think, would openly admit, yeah, I secretly am desiring that person to fall on their face. Now, you may to your spouse, you may to your diary, but rarely out loud. Because we know that's an ugly side of us that we all have. So here's what I want you to do. Here's your homework for this week, okay? You ready? 3 things. Name your pride, claim your pride, and reveal your pride. Name your pride. You got to name it. You got to know what is the area of pride that you have. You go, why do I have to name it? Well, you cannot fix what you cannot name. If you don't actually say, okay, this is the area of pride that I struggle in, you will never be able to fix that area of pride. Why do you claim it? Why do I have to own my pride? Because you cannot sell what you do not own. So you got to own it. You got to go, listen, I'm going to name it. This is the area of pride. Whatever it is, I'm going to name this area of pride, and I'm going to own it. That's my pride. I recognize that that's my pride, and I have to get rid of that. I have to sell that. And the last one, and this is where you're all going to stop, I'm just telling you, is to reveal your pride. Now, I'm not talking about some false humility, Instagram, Facebook post. Oh, I'm so sorry to all the people that I've hurt over the years because I'm so awesome, and no. This is to someone who you love and who loves you, who you can, in a moment of absolute vulnerability, say, hey, I've gone through these 7 questions. I recognize that this is the area of pride that I have. I own the fact that it's me. That's exactly who it is. And I need to tell you that because I know that if I don't reveal it, it stays in the shadows. And when things are in the shadows, things hold on to power. Until you're willing to put light on it, it will always hold power over you. And so when you're willing to reveal it, when you're willing to say, this is it, this is who I am, this is what's going on, and I'm revealing it, I'm not celebrating it, I'm just telling you who it is, because if it stays hidden, it's going to stay in power, and I don't want it to have power over me anymore, because I recognize that when I have pride in my life, it triggers the opposition of God, and I don't want to live life in opposition to God, because that doesn't end well, and we're going to talk about that next week. A guy named King Uzziah, who was proudful and arrogant, and God goes, oh yeah, I will smack you down. But I recognize that if I'm willing to work on it, I'm willing to name it and claim it and reveal it and recognize it, and I want to release it, then I can begin to live in humility, because when I live in humility, that invites the blessing of God. in my life. So that's your homework this week. And if you're married and it's Friday and you haven't talked about it, one of you go, okay, we need to talk about this. We need to have a conversation and talk about yourself, not them, and take those steps. Because pride triggers God's opposition, but humility invites God's blessing. Father God, we thank you so much. We are in absolute awe of your willingness to love us enough to guide us and direct us. And God, the fact that you'll be so honest with us, just say, hey, listen, here's the reality. If you hold on to pride, you're living in actual opposition to me, and I'm going to oppose you. I'm not going to let you be successful in that area because you have pride. And that pride, you're going to think when it's done that you did it and not realizing that I'm the one that did it through you. And so I'm not going to let that pride continue to stay in your life because, God, you know that pride pushes you out. And the best thing and the most important thing and the most blessed thing that can happen in our life is a relationship with you. And so, God, we pray that we would be honest with ourselves and we would recognize the pride that we have in our lives. As hard as it is, as painful, as humbling, and sometimes just downright excruciating, to be open before you and before others. And God, in our brokenness before you, we ask that you put us back together with humility and grace. And God, we can stand in your presence and we can literally go, God, I thank you for bringing all these blessings into my life because you taught me how to be humble. And I thank you for that. And I pray this in Jesus' precious and most holy name. Amen.